All right, I think we are just about ready to get started. Thank you everyone for being here tonight for our webinar, What to Do If COVID-19 Disrupts Your Work. I really appreciate you taking the time to take a few minutes out of your evening for this, and I hope you will find it educational. So let's get started. My name is Henry-Moreland. I am the founder of Freelance Financial Planning. I'm a former professional classical singer, former freelancer myself, and I started my company about 2 years ago to help freelancers and other types of self-employed people work towards achieving financial security. And my collaborator tonight is Saki Kurose. And Saki, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself?
I hope you can hear me. This is Saki Kurose. I'm a freelance violinist from Cleveland, and I've been pursuing the Certified Financial Planner (CFP) designation for the last couple of years. And my specialty is in student loans, so I'll be covering that a little bit later and some other sections. But basically, when all my concerts were canceled, I started looking for resources, and there's a lot of confusion out there. And I found out that Ben was offering help for freelancers. So I reached out to him and we were able to put this presentation together. So I hope it's really helpful to you, and the slides will be sent out later. So we'll get started.
Yes, thank you. And yeah, Saki really kind of helped me put this together. She reached out to me, and that was kind of where the idea of the webinar came from. So I just want to give you a little bit of a roadmap for going tonight. The first section is, I call it How to Plan for This. It's really going to be about how to make a plan, make a roadmap for the next 3 or 4 months. Especially if you're dealing with, income being lost, trying to tamp down expenses, see what kind of resources you have available. So the first section will be on that. The second section is on the CARES Act, which is the big legislative relief bill, the relief law that just became law almost a week ago now. And it's a very large and widespread package, but there are some key provisions of it that really will make an impact on freelancers. And so I wanted to cover those tonight to give you an idea of what you should look for. There are still a lot of unknowns in terms of how some of these provisions will play out. It was a very large bill that got passed very quickly, and so we're still waiting on some guidance on a lot of these things. But this will at least give you a little bit of a guide of where to watch out for news and guidance coming along. Third section is more for resources that you have available now, emergency grants, other type of resources that you can use for the next foreseeable future that you have available to help you get through this time. And then finally at the end, we're going to do a question and answer session. You can feel free to use the Q&A function in your Zoom controls and ask any questions you have throughout the presentation, and then we will get to your questions sort of as they come in at the end of the presentation. So with that, let us dive in. So, how to plan for this. Obviously, no one really planned for this, but the amount of disruption that this pandemic has caused means that a lot of people, and a lot of people are dealing with questions that they really don't know how to answer. Questions like, well, all my gigs just got canceled and I have no income. What do I do for the next foreseeable future? How long is this going to last? What is the government going to do to, help give people relief? And I don't have a crystal ball. I can't answer all of those questions, but I can sort of guide you through a process. And this is what I've been using with some of the pro bono sessions I've been doing. This is how I've been sort of working through these questions with clients. Is I have a process that starts with basically just sitting down and going through the numbers of the next few months and really trying to come up with a plan for what this is going to look like. So step one of this is just identifying what sources of income you're going to have available. It may not seem like much, but it's worth giving it some thought to what actually might be coming in over the next 2 or 3 months. So if you have any remaining gigs, that's great. If they've all been canceled, then you kind of have to think about other things. Do you have any work that can be moved online? Do you teach at all? Is that something you can move to a virtual sort of meeting, lessons kind of thing? Do you rely on sales or royalties at all? Do you rely on sales in person? Is it time to invest in creating an online store of your work? How can you move that to a more socially distant sort of business model? And then performing. I know a lot of you on this call are performers in some way or another. There are different ways that I've seen a lot of people doing performances online. Some of them are just, they're going on and, putting performances on YouTube and maybe have a link to a Kickstarter page or some sort of crowdfunding page. There are people who are starting Patreon accounts and using that to sort of use their audience as maybe a source of funding. It may not be something that's going to keep the lights on for the next 6 months or something, but now is a good time, especially if you have more time on your hands, to start thinking about how can you develop and adapt what it is you do to sort of come out of this on the other side in a better position than when you started. No one expected this thing to happen, but it is possible to potentially use this time to maybe develop a business that's more along the lines of what you really want to do. If you feel like you're working towards something that you haven't quite achieved yet, think of what that actually looks like and sort of use this time for that. Anyway, that was a little bit of diversion, but moving on to other sources of income. If you have any unpaid invoices or unfunded grants, make sure you account for those. And, sometimes maybe some of these invoices are just not going to come in because of, times are tough for everyone. Companies may not have the income to pay their invoices. That's unfortunate, but so you have to be realistic about what you can actually expect. But again, if you do have actual time on your hands right now, maybe it's a good time to chase down some of those unpaid invoices that you have. Unemployment compensation. We're going to have a section on this later on because I know it's something people have a lot of questions on, but that could be a potential source of income even if you're a freelancer, and we'll talk about a little bit more about what unemployment means for freelancers coming up in this presentation. Again, something that we'll be covering in a little bit, but government stimulus checks, those are in theory coming in the next few weeks to few months. No one really knows exactly when, but they are coming at some point. They've passed it in the law. And tax refunds. If you are expecting a tax refund, go ahead and file your taxes right now, and that could be a potential source of cash. And really what you're wanting to do with any of these things is just build up your cushion of available cash to be able to have a bit of a safety net for yourself. And as much as you can, some people aren't going to be able to build up much of a safety net at all right now because they're just not getting any income. But if any of these things sort of apply to you, now is the time to stash those and not necessarily spend them or invest them in any way. You really just want to focus on building up cash and liquidity right now. And then loans are another potential source of income. It's not really what people think of income, but in theory, it's cash in the door. And we'll talk a little bit about small business loans, another type of credit coming up later in the presentation. So this is kind of the first step of planning for the next few months. And when I say the next few months, it's not really a specific time frame that we're looking for, but the next 3 to 4 months is when it's really looking like it's going to be very hard for people. And certainly this situation with the virus doesn't seem like it's going to end before then. On the other hand, the effects are so widespread and so many people are being affected by this that it will be necessary for more to be done in terms of government aid, more to be done in terms of other resources that can become available. And that's going to just have to come if this lasts more than a couple or 3 months. And so what I'm working towards is helping people plan until, July, August, basically working towards getting through the summer with the income and the resources that they have. Because after that, if this is still so widespread of a problem, there's just going to have to be more available for people. So that's kind of what I'm working towards with this initial process. Step 2 is inventorying and prioritizing available resources, and Saki is going to go through this with you.
Okay, so in terms of when to use these funds, we put it in order that you should use these funds that are available to you. So I'll talk about this in order. So first, you want to look at your savings and emergency fund. So that's basically the cash you have in your checking and savings account. And then next up is line of credit. So it's basically an option to access a set amount of money you can borrow. It kind of works like a credit card where you have a spending limit and you pay monthly. And it gives you a lot more flexibility than like personal loans, which is basically a lump sum of money that you would repay over a fixed term. So an example of secured line of credit would be home equity line of credit. It's basically an option to borrow some equity in your home, and it's something you want to establish if that's available to you. And it's got generally a lower interest rate than consumer loans. So next up, credit cards and loans. You'd have to pay a higher interest rate charges if you don't pay this in full. So I would advise against doing like cash advance on your credit card. And next up, if you have investments like taxable accounts, that would be brokerage, mutual funds, they might have tax consequences. So you want to be careful about this as well. And lastly, retirement accounts. I would save this as a last resort kind of thing. They include employer plans, like if you have 401k, 403b, or IRA account. So the government raised the maximum loan amount to $100,000, and you wouldn't have to pay the usual 10% penalty if you draw money from this. So it is an option for you as a last resort, and you can take a single distribution in 2020 or over 3 years, and you would have 3 years to repay the amount that you draw from this. And lastly, we put emergency grants last, and we'll cover this a little bit more later, but I think it'll be really hard to get, especially the national ones. But if you do get it, it's a really great resource to use before you dip into these resources that are listed at the bottom of this list.
So yeah, thank you. So yes, that's kind of the second step then, is looking at what you have sort of available on hand right now for the next few months, and not only just what you have available, but also being able to prioritize how you take them out. And I'll show you in a few moments how you can maybe go about actually putting this all down. But we're going to go to our next step here, which is budget, which is kind of the expense side of the ledger, and looking at how to budget things that are upcoming. So you want to basically write this down or use a budgeting program, but you're going to start by laying out what are your essential expenses, the things that you really just need to keep a roof over your head and have food on the table. Your rent, your utilities, your groceries, those are your real fixed costs that you really just need to be able to pay just to keep living, essentially. Next, you'll look at business expenses and what do you need to keep paying to sort of keep your freelance business going. If you have, oftentimes there are technology subscriptions that people have to pay. There are membership dues for professional organizations, those kind of things. You may have options available to defer or put a pause on some of those expenses, but look at what expenses you do need to use to keep doing any work that you're still doing. Don't forget to account for expenses that aren't just monthly. If you have upcoming car repairs or home repairs that you need to make, if you are going to have a tax bill coming up. We'll talk a little bit more about the timing of taxes, but if you think you're going to be owing $5,000 for your 2019 taxes, you'll need to account for that as well. In general, it's a good idea now if you had been planning on making any large purchases, to put those off. Obviously, no one is traveling right now, really, and no one is, some people are buying homes right now, but no one's really, I don't think, I think we all know what's going on. The people I've talked to know that we're in sort of lockdown mode, and that it's, everyone's kind of treating this as we're living on sort of the bare bones right now. But in general, I think it's a good idea to put off any big purchases and to keep the sort of unnecessary expenses minimal, but only up to a point, because no, you don't need a Netflix subscription to survive, and you don't need newspaper subscriptions or books or movies or any of those kind of things, but everyone is locked in right now, and we all need things to keep us sane. So it's not a moral judgment to say that these are unnecessary expenses. It's just a category I use. But at the same time, everyone needs something right now to pass the time when they're not working and pass the time in general. So yes, you're going to have some of these expenses probably. Don't feel too bad about having them. Just try to keep them as minimal as possible. If you have any subscriptions you don't use anymore, it's a good time to probably cancel those. Next, I just wanted to mention a couple budgeting tools I use. You can sit and write these all out. And I'm actually going to show you a tool that I've put together for you to potentially do that. But if you'd prefer to use sort of an online budgeting tool, there are a couple ones that I sort of recommend. You Need to Budget is my favorite. It's the one that I use, but it does cost money. It costs $84 a year, but they do have a 1-month free trial that you can use to kind of try it out. It's fairly involved. It takes a little bit of time to figure out how best to use it, I think, but I think it's the best one out there. And it's good to, you can use that 1-month trial just to try it out and see if you like it too. For a free budgeting tool, mint.com is my favorite. And both of these you can sort of connect automatically to your bank account. They'll pull in sort of your spending, and you'll be able to sort of not just plan your budget for the future, but also keep track of how you've actually been doing with that. So now I actually want to switch and show you a tool that I've been using with clients here. Let me get over to it now. So I'm going to make this available for anyone who's on this webinar. I'm going to send out, I've got it, it's just a Google Doc, and I'm going to share it via link to anyone, to everyone who's on this webinar after. I'm just going to send out a follow-up email that has the link to this. But it's a budgeting document that that I developed and have been using with clients that I've been working with on this during this crisis. And it's, like I said, just sort of a planning out of the next few months of what things look like from the income side and the expense side. I've got your different categories of expenses in here: essentials and businesses and non-essentials. And essentially what you do is, write down any of the income and literally just sit down and go through what what are you going to make or spend in each of these months in these categories. So if you expect, I just put in some example numbers in here. If you expect to earn $1,000 this month in gig income and whatever's left over, maybe it's an unpaid invoice or something, put that in, and you don't expect anything for the rest of it, plan it out. If this is what you're going to get for unemployment after that, then put it in. You're going to have a stimulus check at some point. It may be $1,200, it may be something else, but put that in as well. And you'll be able to take this and modify it in any way you want to. You can add categories, you can take things out, you can really do anything what you want with this. This is just a template that you can sort of make your own. But it should be pretty straightforward, even if you're not totally spreadsheet savvy. Really all you need to do is put in the numbers here and it'll automatically do the calculations here and here for that. So what you do is you sit down and you write your expenses in, or you write your income in for the next few months. You write your expenses in these categories for the next few months. Any business expenses I have categories in here for. And then, like I said, non-essential expenses, which may be essential to your mental health, that's fine, but just put in what you expect to spend. And all these income sources and all the expense sources are tallied up over here. And you see this person is making $8,680 in income during this time period. They are spending $15,860 during the same time period. So their need for cash during that time period, the amount they're spending minus the amount they're earning, is $7,180. What you can do with that information then is go down and inventory what resources you have available here. So bank accounts, any sort of checking, savings, emergency accounts that you have, put those amounts there. Any available credit that you have on your credit cards. This isn't the amount, like the balance on your credit card. This is the amount that you have available. So if you've got a $5,000 credit limit, put it down here. That's available to you. It doesn't mean you necessarily want to use it, but it's there if you need it. If you have a line of credit, like Saki was mentioning, if you have a home equity line of credit or a business line of credit, put that in there as well. If you have any sort of investments, brokerage accounts, retirement accounts, again, you may not want to use them, but put them down. And so once you have everything down that's available, then go and prioritize it. So you see we have a cash need of $7,180 here. This hypothetical person has $10,000 in the bank. Well, that's good. It means that they have enough cash to cover them hypothetically through this situation. They may need, if anything unexpected happens, they may need to tap into these other sources. And so we keep going and we look at what priority. We prioritize what these accounts are. And this isn't going to be the same for every single person. It's really up to you to decide what order you want to start drawing from things. But in general, like Saki was saying, it's a good idea to take from your sort of most liquid sources first, your bank accounts. If you think you'd be able to pay off a credit card quickly, maybe it's a good idea to prioritize that next. And then if you have any taxable brokerage accounts and any retirement accounts, you go on down the line, and more as you go down, those are more and more sort of a last resort for when you really need it just to survive. But when you have everything sort of laid out, what's available, you're able to prioritize what you're going to take from it, and you sort of have an idea from here what you're actually going to need. So again, I'm going to make this document available for anyone who wants it. I will send out a follow-up email after this webinar that's going to have a link to it. I will do the same thing with the slides. I'll have a link to the slides to this presentation as well, because that has some links to some helpful things. But if you find this useful, great. I hope that you're able to. So, and I'll be happy to answer any questions about it during the Q&A as well. So I'll move back over now to our slides. So next section is how to maybe cut some of your expenses. Maybe you you did the numbers in that spreadsheet, and you still have a bit of a gap to make up between what you have available and what you're actually going to need for the next few months. So how do you cut down on some of your expenses? The first thing, I think people who are self-employed, who are using health insurance from the Affordable Care Act, either through the federal healthcare exchange or through a state exchange, what those people should do is go to healthcare.gov or to your state healthcare exchange website and report a change in circumstances. What that is, so when you applied for your current healthcare plan, which you do every year, so if you did this during open enrollment last year, it was at the end of the year, you had to estimate what your income was going to be for the year. And so you put in a number for that, and based on what that income number was, you may or may not have been eligible for a premium tax credit, which is a tax credit that essentially, in effect, lowers the premium, the amount that you have to pay every month for your health insurance. The higher your income is, the lower the lower that premium tax credit is, so the more you pay for your health insurance premiums. And if you're over a certain amount, you don't get any credit and you pay the full amount. But if you have very low income, you in effect pay less for your premiums. So if your income, as a result of COVID-19, as a result of losing work or anything like that, if your income has dropped significantly from what it was last year, you should go in and report a change in circumstances, and you may have the ability to effectively lower what you're paying for healthcare right now. If your income has dropped a substantial amount, you may be even able to be eligible for Medicaid, which would reduce your healthcare costs even further. I think everyone who is seeing their income drop and is on one of these healthcare plans should at least go in and report this. Obviously, doing this requires that you have to estimate what your income is going to be for this year, and that may not be, it may be difficult to do right now. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty what the rest of the year is going to look like. But it's the same thing that you do every year when you apply for health insurance. You have to estimate, you have to put in a number. If that ends up being off in one direction or another at the end of the year, when you file your tax return, you either get a tax credit for the amount you overpaid, or you have to pay an extra tax for the amount that you underpaid. So that will be made up. But again, if things change again later this year, you can go in and report another change in circumstance. And so you can do this, essentially however many times you want to, but I think it's a really good idea for people to do right now if they think their income is going to be significantly lower this year than it was when they estimated their income for the year. The next thing that almost anyone should do who this applies to is deferring their student loan payments. And Saki's going to talk about this later, but I wanted to put it in this section as well. Again, there may be a few people who will not want to defer their student loan payments, but almost everyone, I think, this is going to be a good idea for if you are worried about your cash flow in the next few months. We're going to have more on this later in the presentation. Homeowner and renter relief. So there are a lot of homeowner relief programs right now, not so much for renter relief yet, but we're going to go down through sort of what some of the different programs are right now for people who are either homeowners or renters. So for different types of loans, there are different types of what are called forbearance periods. If you have an FHA loan right now, well, they're doing a 60-day moratorium on any sort of foreclosure proceedings. If you have a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loan, which is the majority of homeowners, the majority of mortgages are owned by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, you right now have the ability to apply for a 12-month hardship forbearance if you are experiencing financial difficulties. What forbearance is in this case is you can stop making payments for up to 12 months. You will not owe any sort of late fees, and it won't have an impact on your credit score. But there still will be income, or there still will be interest accruing on your mortgage during this time period. And so what that means is you can put your payments off for up to 12 months, but after that time, because interest has been continuing to accrue, that will increase the size of your loan and will probably make it so that it will probably extend the term of the loan. So you'll be paying off your mortgage for longer than you had initially expected to. So there are trade-offs, but it is something that's available for people who need the assistance. If you have a mortgage through a private lender, like it's at Bank of America or something, some of them offer deferment program options, some of them don't. It really is just up to the individual lender, and you can contact them and see what your options are for that. Next, some individual states are ordering suspensions of evictions for renters who aren't able to make their rent payments, suspending cutoffs of utilities, electricity and gas cutoffs for people who aren't able to pay their utilities, and even mortgage payments. I know in New York there was a 90-day moratorium on mortgage payments that went into effect. And so unfortunately all this is really state by state right now. There's no one single federal order saying no one's going to be evicted right now. So look and see what's happening in your state in terms of suspensions of evictions or utilities cutoffs. A really useful thing I've seen, this Forbes article has been keeping an updated running list of what individual states are doing for homeowners and renters. And so you can go to this link, and again, I'll send out the slides and you can just click on it rather than having to write the whole thing down. But this site has a good list of what individual states are doing. The downside of this, obviously, is that all of these suspensions are temporary. They'll expire at some point, and people will need to continue paying their rent payments or their utilities, regardless of whether they have income anymore. Also, landlords, utilities companies, they'll have the ability to legally collect on unpaid rent or unpaid utilities payments. So you may actually be ordered by a judge to repay your back rent, your back utilities payments, and that could put you even further behind than you were before. So compared to the options on the previous page with loan deferments and ACA and everything, like these are getting more and more to be sort of last resorts. If you really need them just to keep a roof over your head, there are options available for you, but they're certainly not the first thing I would look at. So credit cards. Again, it depends bank to bank who has issued your credit card, but different banks do have different deferment options. If you're carrying a lot of credit card debt right now, that's probably carrying a high rate of interest too. And if you defer your credit card payments, you are building more interest on top of that credit card balance. And so it's really not a good situation you want to be in, to be going into forbearance with a large credit card debt that's accruing interest. Again, for some people, just to keep a roof over their head, that's what they need to do. But at the very least, you should probably be making your minimum interest payments on your credit cards. Tax payments. If you are have an existing installment agreement with the IRS, your payments are currently suspended until July 15th. Any new installment agreements after that are still in effect. But if you're currently making installment payments, they are suspended until July 15th. Bottom line for all these things is you shouldn't just stop making payments. You should contact the lender, the landlord, the utility company, the IRS, whoever it is that you're paying. They likely have some sort of forbearance program or something along those lines. Even landlords, it's obviously going to depend on who it is, but some people are having success in being able to work out some sort of a deal that they're able to be able to work with. Don't just stop making payments, because that's a way to really just make the situation worse. Really just contact those people and figure out what your options are with them. All right, Saki is going to go through the student loan relief that I mentioned before. So go ahead.
Okay, so student loan relief. The government announced that all federal student loan payments will be suspended until September 30th. And during this time, starting on March 13th, no interest should be accruing on your account. So this should all be auto-implemented by the government, so you shouldn't have to do anything. But I recommend that if you do have auto payment set up, that you cancel that just to be sure. So the loans that qualify for this is only federal loans. So there'll be direct loans. Private loans would not qualify. If you're a parent paying student loans for your children, Parent Plus loans are federal, so they do qualify. If you have older loans from 2010 and before 2010, the FEL loans, FFEL, it's a Federal Family Education Loans. That doesn't qualify, and Perkins loans from your school also do not qualify. There are ways to qualify the FEL and Perkins loans. You'd have to consolidate the loans into a federal direct loan. But I would advise against that for now because it takes 60 days to consolidate a loan. If you were on track for forgiveness, it cancels the progress you've made. It would also cancel Perkins cancellation. And when you consolidate, your unpaid interest capitalizes, which means the interest becomes part of your principal. So if you do have these loans, the FEL or Perkins, see if you could qualify for income-based repayment plan. I think that would be better than doing a forbearance. So if you have these qualifying federal direct loans, and if you are on track for loan forgiveness, the 6 months will count towards forgiveness programs like if you're on track for public service loan forgiveness, PSLF, or the other kind of taxable forgiveness. So do not pay anything until September. And if you're not going for forgiveness and you were paying down your student loans aggressively anyways, if you have enough emergency funds and want to take advantage of this window where no interest is accruing, also if you don't have any outstanding unpaid interest and you just want to make extra payments and reduce your principal, you would end up paying less in total interest for your loan. So that might be a good idea. But it sounds like you would have to make a request to keep your auto payment on, or you would have to do this manually. The other thing is during the 6 months, it'll be really easy to forget if you have to do your annual income recertification. So don't forget to do that if you do have to do it, because if you do forget, your unpaid interest capitalizes. So be sure to do that. And lastly, for federal loans, consider recalculating your income-driven repayment, if you, especially if you have reduced income, because if you can reduce the monthly payment on your repayment plan, then that could help you even after September. So to do that, you could go to studentaid.gov and you would log in with your FSA, your federal student aid login. So moving on to private loans. So the private loans are not eligible for this 6-month suspension. So, well, first of all, don't refinance federal loans into private loans right now. But if you do already have private student loans, really the only thing you can do is to shop around for a lower interest rate. And it never really hurts to look for a lower rate if you have these private student loans, because you can refinance multiple times and even earn cash bonuses. So I would just keep shopping around for a lower rate. And it might even make sense to get a higher interest rate if it lowers your monthly payment, especially if you're struggling to make these student loan payments. So I know student loans were just really complicated to begin with, and this made it even more complicated. So I'll answer any questions at the end if you have any questions about student loans. But that's about it for the student loans for now.
Yeah, thank you. So to kind of wrap up this section, you know, people right now who I think are the most anxious are the ones with higher, you know, obviously with uncertain income for the next few months and higher fixed expenses. And some of the highest fixed expenses people have right now are their mortgage payments or their rent, their student loan payments, and their health insurance. And so there are ways with all of those things to be able to reduce or defer or eliminate those payments for the time being. And, you know, you can make adjustments to your monthly spending. You can, you know, cancel a Netflix subscription. You can make little tweaks. But some of these programs that are being offered right now with student loans and with mortgage relief and that kind of thing, those are going to be the big difference makers, I think, for people for the next few months. So really keep these things in mind. And when we send out these slides later on, go back and see if any of these things apply to you. I know this is a ton of information, so I want to make sure that no one misses anything that they could possibly benefit from here. So we're going to move on now to the CARES Act. So this was the act that was passed last Friday, March 27th. And the big headline, you know, the big headline provision of this was the economic impact payments. Basically, government is sending out checks or direct deposits in this case of $1,200 per adult and $500 per child. There is a catch with that, though, that if you make more income than certain limits, which is $75,000 for single people or $150,000 for married couples, those payments are reduced, or if you make even more than that, they could be eliminated entirely. So how do you figure out how much you're actually going to get? Well, what the IRS is doing is looking at your last income tax return that you filed. So if you filed for 2019, they're looking at that income tax return. If you haven't filed 2019, they're looking at your 2018 return. And if you earned less than those limits above, that $75,000 or $150,000, you will get a payment in, for most people, it will be direct deposited if you have done direct deposit with the government before. Otherwise, there are going to be other options for people to get those payments. But if your last income tax return you made below those income limits, you will get the full $1,200 per adult and $500 per child. If you made above those limits with your last tax return, you will get a reduced payment. And how that works for people who earned more than those limits in 2018 or 2019, but are earning below those limits right now, which is a lot of people, because a lot of people have reduced income now than what they did a year or two ago, is they're going to get a reduced payment. And by immediate, I mean in the next 3 or 4 weeks or months or whenever they decide to send these out. We don't really know when that's going to be, but that's what I mean by immediate payments. So if you made above those income limits on your last tax return, you'll get a reduced payment now. If you make below those limits in 2020, you will get the difference as a tax credit on your 2020 tax return. Obviously, that doesn't help people who need the cash right now. If you're making significantly less income today, you might need that cash today. Unfortunately, that's just how this law has shaken out. So I've got this little table here that's color coded that will hopefully be somewhat helpful to predict what you're going to receive from this. So if you made below the limits in 2018 or 2019 and below the limits in 2020, you'll just get that payment. And you'll be done with it. If you made more than the limits in 2018 or 2019, and in 2020 you make below those limits, you have a reduced or eliminated immediate payment this year, but you get the tax credit for the difference on your next year's tax return. If you made above the limits in 2018, 2019, and above the limits in 2020, you get a reduced or eliminated payment now, but you don't get any tax credit in the future. If you made below the limits in 2018 or 2019 and somehow are making more income this year than you made on your last tax returns, first of all, congratulations, that's great. Secondly, you will get that payments this year, but you won't have to give it back when you do your tax return. So it's kind of a gift for those people. But I think people who made more in 2018, 2019 than they are in 2020 are probably going to be pretty rare. So that's kind of the breakdown of who is actually getting these payments. And that's really everyone. You don't have to be a freelancer, obviously. Like, everyone is eligible for these payments as long as so I should say everyone who is a US citizen is eligible for these payments. There's questions about who are citizens and have tax IDs. And unfortunately, I can't answer all the questions about non-citizens and permanent residents, but this information should be available out there. So going on to other provisions, payment is nice, but the expanded unemployment, I think, is the real game changer for freelancers in the CARES Act. Self-employed individuals previously were ineligible for receiving any sort of unemployment compensation. They are now eligible to receive unemployment. Not only they're eligible to receive unemployment, they're eligible for up to 39 weeks of benefits. That is the 26 weeks that is sort of the maximum that states now generally allow, plus an additional 13 weeks that the federal government is kicking in for. On top of that, there is an extra pandemic expanded unemployment compensation that is whatever the state calculates that you're eligible to receive as unemployment, plus $600 a week. So $600 a week, you compare that to the $1,200 that people are getting for their economic impact payments. This $600 a week is a lot more impactful for people who find themselves out of work right now. You can conceivably make more from this unemployment program than maybe you were making before this, because the $600 a week is a flat payment. It isn't based on any calculation of what you were making before. If you're eligible for unemployment, you are eligible for $600 a week, plus whatever your state unemployment rate is. So that's a huge boost for anyone who has found themselves without income right now. People who were full-time employed, but whose employers have reduced their hours, they may be eligible for some sort of unemployment compensation too. That was something that unemployment didn't cover before. Now it does, and that really, the rules for that vary by state, but it should be available for most workers now who qualify for that. The benefits are retroactive to January 27th, 2020. So if you lost work before, or you lost work, before now, sometime since, if your gigs got canceled in February and you haven't been able to find work since then, you can actually get retroactive benefits back to that time as long as it's after January 27th. And then one more difference from normal unemployment is that if you quit your job because of something coronavirus related, whether it was you got sick or you needed to stay home for a stay-in-place order, or your kids' school closed and you need to be home to watch them. If you quit your job, it doesn't matter if you quit or were laid off for any of these reasons, you're still eligible for unemployment. Previously, if you quit your job, you were not eligible at all. So now if you have a reason that's coronavirus related, which I think everyone here does, then you'll be eligible for unemployment. So what does that mean for a few different types of scenarios? I wanted to just give a few, and this is by no means comprehensive, but these may be some of the common scenarios people see. So in the first couple, my employer closed their office, but I'm able to work from home at my regular rate. Sorry, you're not eligible for benefits if you're still working, if you're still able to telework from home and still making your regular salary. You're not eligible for unemployment, even if your employer's office is closed. That's sort of common sense, but that's the case. Likewise, if you're not working but you're receiving sick leave or like a paid family leave, you're also not eligible for benefits because you're still making income. On the other hand, if you are someone, so my upcoming gigs were canceled because of the pandemic and I won't get paid for them, yes, you are eligible for benefits. My children's school is closed and I can't work because I need to watch them during the day. Yes, you are eligible for benefits. Even if you said if you quit your job for that, you're eligible for benefits. The last one, so all my 1099 gigs were canceled, but I have a small W-2 job that I'm still being paid for. So that's a big maybe. And this is kind of one of the gray areas that still exists. And that's kind of the lead into my next slide here. So if you think you might be eligible for unemployment, and I think this includes that last scenario above where you have a few different types of income and some of them are gone and some of them are still there, apply for unemployment. They have not finalized what the rules are going to be, and states are still really figuring out this whole system too. So if you think you might be eligible, just apply, get the ball rolling, get the process started, and find out what you're actually eligible for. You know, the unemployment numbers for last week just came out, and in the last 2 weeks, 10 million people applied for unemployment for the first time. States are getting crushed right now by unemployment applications. That by the way, those 10 million people that's before unemployment was available for freelancers. So it's going to be even more this week. Be persistent. States are still updating their software, updating their systems. You might apply for unemployment. You may have already applied for unemployment and gotten a message that says you're not eligible because you're self-employed. Try it again. Be persistent. Try to contact those unemployment offices. It's going to be really hard to try and get through to someone in person right now. But if you have the patience, you might want to go that route. Otherwise, keep applying. There's no limit to the number of times you can apply for unemployment. If it keeps telling you you're ineligible, just try again the next day, because states are still updating their systems and maybe still a couple weeks off from being fully prepared for what's happening right now. In the meantime, it's good to know what information that you'll need. The information required to do the filing varies by state. At the bare minimum, you're going to need to know what are the names of your employers over the last, year or so. What dates did you work? What were your pay rates? If you worked in multiple states, so all unemployment is handled at the state level. And if you worked, it's based on where you worked, not necessarily where you live. So if you worked in multiple states, you may need to file unemployment in multiple states. I would start with where you live or where you work the most to start there, because that's where you're going to get the highest potential unemployment benefit. And just start working at it and be persistent and keep trying, because you may take a few times of saying you're ineligible before you can actually break through with this. The link at the bottom of the screen is a great site that you can basically pick your state from the drop down, and it gives you the website for the unemployment office and whatever information they might have about coronavirus right now. It's just a good one-stop, rather than having to search around for different states' unemployment offices. It's a good place. So I would start there with trying to find your state's unemployment office. Otherwise, Google works just as well too. So one of the other big provisions of the CARES Act didn't create, but expanded some small business loans program that are a pretty big deal potentially for people. Unfortunately, there's also a lot of gray areas here as it comes to freelancers, but this is the basic information. The there were two small business loan programs that were included as part of this CARES Act. The first is called the Paycheck Protection Program. What it does is provides forgivable loans to small businesses and also to freelancers, independent contractors, sole proprietors, basically anyone who qualifies as a type of business owner, of loans of up to 2.5 times your average monthly payroll. If you're self-employed, actually the amount that you earned in self-employment income over the last 12 months qualifies as payroll for these purposes. So if you look at what you earned in self-employment income over the past 12 months, divide that by 12 to get sort of the average monthly amount, and then multiply that by 2.5, you get the amount that you would be eligible to receive as a loan. And these loans can actually be, they're pretty complicated, so I didn't put all the information about them on this page, but the links below have some good information. But these loans can be forgivable, which means that they can be essentially wiped off without having to repay them back. If you spend the proceeds on certain qualified expenses, one of those is payroll. And then there are other expenses like rent and mortgage, and the rules for this are pretty complicated. I would recommend, so you need to apply for these loans starting April 10th for freelancers or independent contractors can start applying April 10th. You need to apply through a qualified small business lender, which is any type of bank. There are other types of lenders too, but I would start through whatever bank you work with right now. It's probably the good place to start, and see if they can help you through this process and understand what you're eligible for. Because particularly with people with maybe multiple types of income, and really a lot of different small business owners or freelancers, the rules are going to be pretty complex. So I hesitate to be too broad in the information I give in here because it's going to be very, I think, individual. So I'd recommend contacting your bank if you're interested in applying for one of these loans. The only other thing I'll say about this is do it soon. There is a limited amount of money that is being put aside for these loans, and once it's gone, for right now, once it's gone, it's gone. Congress may decide to refund this and increase the amount that's available, but for right now, it's going to be, a lot of people are going to be applying for these loans, and so you want to get in fast if you do. So you want to be ready to apply starting April 10th when you're eligible to do this, if it's something you're interested in. The other type of loan that's available right now is called Economic Injury Disaster Advance Loans. These are loans of up to $2 million, and you're probably, not everyone on this call is going to want a $2 million loan, but depending on your ability to repay the loan or the extent of the economic injury that you had, these loans are available up to $2 million. And the real attractive thing about these is that there's a $10,000 advance available, which is essentially a very quick amount of money that basically the SBA will give you within 3 days of successful application for this loan. And the amazing thing about this is it doesn't need to be repaid. As long as there's a list of certain expenses that you need to use this $10,000 on, including payroll, which should be able to include basically paying yourself as a self-employed person. But you don't need to pay that $10,000 back. And that's even if you don't get approved for the full loan you might apply for. So almost anyone who is a business owner of some sort can go in and qualify for this $10,000 advance. And for this, as opposed to the Paycheck Protection Loan, where you need to apply through a bank, the Economic Injury Disaster Loans, you apply directly through SBA, and it's at that link below is the application. So again, there are a lot of complexities to small business loans. I don't consider myself a small business loan expert. I know enough about them to be dangerous. So I would recommend talking either to your bank, talking to, if you have a local SCORE chapter, which we have a little bit on SCORE later on, but SCORE is a volunteer organization of small business mentors who know a lot about business planning and about business financing. That might be able as well to help you figure out whether this is something you're eligible for, whether it's something you really need or want to do, and whether it's a good idea to actually apply for it. So these are just things that are available for you, but they can potentially be a big deal for someone who's a freelancer and needs the cash in the next few months to be able to keep their business going. Okay, finally, some new tax filing considerations that people have. Most people know at this point that the tax filing deadline and payment deadline has been moved back to July 15th. If you're paying quarterly estimated taxes, this includes both your tax return for 2019 and your quarter one of 2020 estimated tax payment that goes along with your tax return. As of now, quarter two estimated tax payment date still remains June 15th. So in theory, you might be, maybe people don't have a lot of estimated payments for Q2 because no one's making any money in Q2. But if you do have a quarterly estimated tax payment for Q2, you might have to pay it before you pay your Q1 estimated payment. So that could change. They may push back that date, but as of right now, that date is still June 15th. So do you want to file your taxes sooner or file them later? The biggest consideration here is, do you expect a tax refund or not? If you expect a tax refund, it's probably a better idea to file sooner. Get that tax refund, it's cash in your pocket. If you expect to owe tax payments and you are worried about having cash flow between now and then to be able to pay the tax payment and also keep a roof over your head, you should wait to file. That's the biggest concern. The economic impact payment that I mentioned before that depends on what your 2018 or 2019 income, that may factor into it. You may want to file your 2019 income tax return if you were not eligible for a payment based on your 2018 income, but you might be based on your 2019 income. But you'll have to weigh that against whether you expect to owe a tax, whether you expect to owe a tax payment or have a tax refund. Because if you're going to file your income taxes for 2019, because of you might get a $1,200 tax payment, but you're going to owe a $5,000 tax payment at the same time, then you should just wait to file and not have to pay that tax payment. So most people I expect who expect a tax refund should file sooner, and most people who expect to owe tax payments should probably file later. So people are already talking about what is going to be the next sort of relief that comes along for people. And the things I'm hearing about the most right now are some sort of renter relief on a national level, because there's been significant relief for homeowners, but there's just not much available for renters. And what there is available, it's at a state by state, not a federal level. So some sort of national renter relief program would be maybe something we could expect to see next. More direct payments. The $1,200 payment is nice, but it's gonna barely cover rent, or maybe not cover rent at all for a lot of people. And so if this thing keeps going for more than a month or two, the government's gonna have to start shelling out more cash to people just to keep them home and keep a roof over their heads. On top of that, I hear about federal aid going to states. A lot of states right now are taking the lead in providing some of these programs, especially like renter relief and cutting off utilities and all that kind of stuff. States need to balance their budgets, and right now a lot of states they're getting less income taxes right now. They're getting less sales taxes and all those things that they need to have revenue. And so there's going to be need to be federal aid going to states, so states can continue to provide programs, can continue to provide state pension programs, continue to provide schools, all that kind of stuff. If some federal aid doesn't come soon, states are going to need to start making budget cuts. I know New York is talking about that a lot right now. What budget cuts are they going to need to make? So that's potentially next, coming down the line. And I've heard something about just today, and I didn't even have time to put this in the slide, but people are talking about potentially the federal government paying hospitals directly for coronavirus-related healthcare costs for uninsured people, which would be a huge benefit for people who don't have health insurance right now. Again, these are all maybe potential things that would come down the line that would be next, and I would look out for. But obviously none of these are enacted yet or even really past the idea stage right now. But just keep an eye out for how these things might affect you in the future. Okay, so that kind of covers what are the biggest impacts of the CARES Act right now. Now we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the emergency money that might be available out there in terms of grants and relief, either at a state or local level or from nonprofits. And Saki is going to take you through some of the first parts of this.
Okay, so for this next section, we just gathered a bunch of resources for you to look for whatever you need. So these lists are being updated all the time, so I would just keep looking back at them and see if there's any new info that you might need. So we listed some of the really big ones. I'll start with the emergency grants, but these are some of the big national ones I found, but I would suggest to start looking locally first, because I think these national ones are going to be really hard to get. But I'll go through them anyways. The first one's the National Endowment for the Arts. The website has a really great list of service organizations, and a lot of these organizations have emergency relief funds. So I would look through this list for if you're looking for any sort of emergency relief funds. The next one, the Freelancers Union, freelancersunion.org. It's actually a really great, just a really great resource for freelancers. It's got a lot of essential resources like about taxes for freelancers. There's financial tools. You can create contracts here. And I found that they've started a freelancers relief fund, which covers up to $10,000 per freelancer household, covers lost income and essential expenses. And applications just actually opened today. So I put a link for that so you could take a look at it and maybe apply. The next one I found is Music Cares. Looks like a similar sort of thing as the Freelancers Union relief, but covers up to $1,000 for canceled work. So there's a link there at the bottom for that. And moving on to other resources. Yeah, at the top there, Gig Workers Collective. There's a list of national resources and also state-by-state links for food, rent, utility, and medical assistance. So if you click on that link that's at the top, you can look for your state there. Also, the second link, it's a really great comprehensive list of resources for freelance artists. There's information on online events, legal, financial information. There's more emergency funding. There's also health and mental health resources, and they even have tips and platforms of teaching online. So basically everything a freelancer needs at this time. And the other organization that Ben talked about a little while ago, SCORE, it's a network of volunteer business mentors. They help with business planning and financing and stuff. So they're offering free assistance and remote mentoring. So that might be something you want to look at. And you can find the local chapter there at their website, score.org. And it looks like they have online workshops and stuff too. So that might be a really great resource to have for us. So Ben's going to talk a little bit about food security next.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people are aware of these programs. I'm just going to run them down. But people, I think if you're not used to being in sort of dire financial circumstances, you may forget that they are potential options for you as well. So I just wanted to remind you of a couple things. SNAP is the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, also known as food stamps, that provides money for people to use on groceries, essentially, and it's based on just basically a card that you get that has money on it that you can use to buy food, and it's all done at the state level. So that link I have has links to all the different 50 state directories, and if your income has really been affected in this, go and see if you're eligible for this, and if you are available, it can be a great resource for getting food during this time. If you're worried about just meeting your expenses for that. Likewise, WIC is a program for families with young children that can provide some assistance in getting things like diapers and formula. So if you have young children and you're worried about providing for them as well, WIC is a great program for those who are low income as well. And obviously food banks are a really important thing right now. They're getting certainly inundated with requests from people, and really are a way that tons of people right now are getting food on their tables right now. But Feeding America is kind of the national network of food banks, and so you can find your local one through them. If you need food through the food banks, they're a great resource to go and find. They may have a central location, or they may have places you can go and pick up food. Otherwise, if you can afford it, they're a great place to donate to right now if you have the resources to either donate food, or if you donate money, they often buy in bulk from grocery stores or from other sources, and can really make those dollars go a long way to help feed people. So if you're likewise looking for a place to donate right now, obviously a lot of you are in financial circumstances that may not be possible, but food banks are a great place to start for getting people, for anyone who has trouble getting food on their table right now. So I just wanted to remind people that these might be options that are available to them now, even if you might think that, hey, these weren't things for me before. You may find that you need these things right now if you're really in this sort of circumstance. I also mentioned before Medicaid. If you are very low income right now, either if you don't have health insurance right now, or if you are paying for an Affordable Care Act plan, if you qualify for Medicaid, you can switch onto that, and it's a much, much less expensive way to pay for healthcare to be covered for healthcare than any Affordable Care Acts, or really almost any other health insurance plan. So these are all resources for people who are very, very much affected by this and are worried about just the basics of getting food and healthcare. But some of you may have need for those. So I just wanted to remind you of their existence here. Moving on, Saki will talk a little bit about some other resources here that are available too.
Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about legal and mental health resources. If you are in any sort of legal trouble, like if you weren't able to collect payment for a gig you played before, or anything like that, there's an organization called the Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts, VLA. I put the link for the National VLA directory there at the top, and it has all the links for the local chapters. But I also put the link for the Cleveland Metro Bar Association, because I thought it had a lot of resources, was really a long list. They had information on free childcare, SNAP, the food assistance program, Medicaid, links to health clinics with free services and sliding fees based on income. And they also had like state-by-state resource guide for music professionals, and more information on financial help and funds. So even if you're not from Cleveland, I think it's a really good website to look at. And mental health, it's really been a stressful time for all of us, I think. So if you're struggling and if you really need to talk to a professional, NAMI is a great resource. It's the National Alliance of Mental Illness. You can contact your state or local branch for resources or referrals. They can refer you to providers with sliding fees based on your income. And if you're looking for any resources online, Ohio Department of Health has a pretty good page on how to cope with COVID-19 anxiety. So I put the link there. And also virusanxiety.com is a free website I found that's specifically for dealing with anxiety relating to this coronavirus crisis, and seemed pretty good. So you can check that out as well. And if you'd rather use apps, some good apps are Headspace, Wiza, and there's some apps like Sambello that's giving you premium content for free for COVID-19. So those are pretty good resources for mental health. And also, if you're physically not feeling well, you can find community health centers that has affordable care in your area. And one thing I just wanted to mention is that I heard about this public charge rule that took effect last month. It basically punishes green card applicants who need public assistance like Medicaid or SNAP. And the U.S. Immigration Services did announce that health services relating to COVID-19, so if you're seeking testing, treatment, or preventative care when the vaccines become available, if you need those health services, that won't count against your green card application. So if you know anyone else who is hesitating to get health care, just know that it's not supposed to negatively affect your application. So it's something you might want to talk to, get some legal help on, but I just thought you should know. And I hope we were able to clear some things up, especially the financial part of everything, and a lot is up in the air, but I think this is our last slide. I just wanted to I just want you to know that you're not alone in this. So just for the big picture, relating to mental health and just health in general, I think the most important thing is that we stay healthy. So yeah, make sure you breathe. If you have to talk to someone, get help from these mental health resources. And yeah, that's about all I have. So Ben, if you have anything to add, I'll hand over it back to you.
Sure, of course. So yeah, what I just wanted to add to this, and I should say we are close to the end. I appreciate everyone for taking their time tonight for this. If you have any questions, I don't see anything right now on the Q&A section. If you want to type something into the Q&A box right now, now is a great time to do it. We'll start taking questions immediately after this. So if you have any questions, please feel free to start asking them now. But I do want to reiterate that right now, just in the big picture, the most important thing right now is just to stay healthy and to, because you can't do any of these things if you're not physically able to to go through them, whether that's working, whether that's the work of having to go through all this unemployment stuff and get your financial situation sorted out. It's really going to change if you're not actually healthy. So keep abiding by the social distancing guidelines that are being recommended right now. None of this is really going to pass until the virus situation calms down. So the more that we can follow by these guidelines, the better it's going to be for everyone economically. I just wanted to say, we've thrown a lot of information at you tonight, and this can easily become overwhelming. But you can afford to stop and breathe for a moment. And, if you need to take a break, if you need to just get some headspace, take a walk, do anything, you don't need to accomplish all this at once. Really, really just take it easy at this, because this stuff will all be here when you come back. I wanted to say, talk to someone, because, especially right now when people are spending a lot of time by themselves, it's easy to get a bit anxious about everything and kind of let the emotional center of our brains take over our thinking. I heard something interesting a while ago about how the emotional center of our brains is in a much more primitive part of our brains than the language center. And when we talk, we're forced to use language. We're forced to use those higher parts of our brain. And talking to someone about, what you're feeling right now, what you're dealing with right now, forces you to learn to use language and forces you to use those higher up parts of your brain, and can really bring you out of this anxious emotional state that you're in into a place where you're actually feeling a little bit more in control. So I encourage you to talk to, whether it's a family member or a friend that you're open with talking to, whether it's your cat or your houseplant or something, just use language and talk to someone, and, put your thoughts into words right now is I think a helpful exercise. Finally, right now is a good time. I sort of mentioned this before, to, use your time in a way that will help you come out on the other side of this in a more successful position than when you started out. And by that I just mean, think about how you're using your time right now. And I'm not saying you need to spend all your time thinking about work right now by any means. Take some mental time off if you need to, but also think about how you can adapt, how you can use, either learn new skills or invest your time in a way that you can end up closer to what you really want to be doing with your life when you come out on the other side of this. It's a bad time, and it's a hard time for everyone right now. But also think about ways that you can make it better, and how you can come out on the other side of this, better than when we all went in. So with that, I'm going to say thank you to everyone for attending. It looks like we've got some questions rolling in, so that's great. And we're going to move on to this Q&A period. So let me look and see. I'm just going to go top to bottom with this. So first question is, do you have to pay unemployment benefits back? The answer is no. Those are payments to you that you don't have to pay back. They are taxable income, I should mention. You do, I think, unemployment benefits have a flat 10% tax rate withdrawn from them, but you do have to report them as income at the end of the year. So when you get those payments, they won't be the full amount that you say you get, as they'll say that you get. So, but you don't have to pay the full amount back at any time. The next question is, how are you two doing? I'm doing well, thank you. It's been a busy week, but it's also, I've been certainly learning a lot and spending a lot of time talking to people, and we're all in this sort of together right now, and I've been talking through a lot of people and talking people through the next few months and through their anxiety, and that's felt really good to be able to help in some way. Saki, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. like you, I've been just learning a lot about all of this in the past couple of weeks, and I'm still doing FaceTime lessons and using the time I have free from the concert cancellations to learn new pieces. And I'm trying to stay healthy by exercising and all that. So I'm doing pretty well.
So thank you to anonymous person who asked that question, because I hope you're doing well too, because that is a really good thing I think to ask each other right now is just how are you doing? So thank you for that. Next question is, how will unemployment benefits affect taxes in future filings? I think I sort of answered that. It is taxable income for the year that you get it in. So if you earn unemployment benefits this year, you'll have to report them on your 2020 tax return next year. So they are just treated as taxable income. They're not self-employment income. You won't have to pay self-employment tax on them, I think anyway, but that's traditionally how they're handled, but you will report them as income. Next question, where does the $600 per week come from? Is it additional unemployment insurance? I did not qualify for unemployment because I'm self-employed. Can I still get the $600 per week? So you're referring to the supplemental, or the pandemic employment pandemic unemployment. You can look it up, but yes, the $600 per week is so that the money for it comes from the federal government, but you'll apply for it at the same time that you apply for regular unemployment. And this is a good example. If you got a message saying you did not qualify for unemployment because you're self-employed, this is a good example of your state may not have their system updated yet. So it's telling you you're not qualified. You should be able to be eligible for unemployment, even if you're self-employed. I would say just keep trying. And it may take a couple weeks for the system to be updated. Luckily, even if you're missing out on payments for the next couple weeks, these unemployment payments, like I said, are retroactive to January 27th. So whenever you are accepted for unemployment, you'll get retroactive payments for that time period, going back to whenever you became unemployed. Next question. I've spent hours trying to apply for unemployment. The website kicks me off every time for server issues. When it doesn't, it refers me to a phone number, which refers me back to the website. It's a closed loop that I haven't been able to penetrate. What suggestions do you have if I'm unable to successfully apply for unemployment? Really just keep trying, unfortunately, is the biggest, really the only answer I can give you. Like I said, 10 million people in the last 2 weeks applied for unemployment. And that's the ones who successfully applied. There were probably many people on top of that who unsuccessfully applied. And that was before they opened up to freelancers. So states are getting crushed right now by applications for unemployment. Keep trying. You're going to get through eventually. It may take a week, it may take 2 weeks, but I just say keep trying. Next, if I apply for both the Paycheck Protection Loan and also the Economic Injury Loan using my self-employed income as my payroll, aren't I trying to get twice as much money for the same thing? In a way, you are, yes, but they are separate loans for separate things. And it's a good question whether or not you'd be able to apply for the same loan for both things. And it may, again, this is sort of a gray area that hasn't really been fully addressed. As far as I know, you can apply for both of those loans, but you may need to prove that you use them both, that you didn't sort of double dip, that you use them both for payroll, but not for the same payroll. It's really sort of confusing. Again, I would talk to a lender or like a SCORE business mentor, or someone who is an expert in small business financing. But it is, I think, sort of a gray area. And I wish I had a better answer than that right now, but that's kind of what I would say right now. Next one, I filled out the unemployment application in Arizona, and they asked the question, what is your financial investment in the business? How does one answer that question? That's a very good question. Usually your financial investments in the business is what did you initially put into that, the business, the company, or whatever it is that you do. So if to start, you know, to start your business, if you had to buy photography equipment, say, or if you had to buy a computer, if it, like that's kind of your initial financial investment. If you just started and didn't really put anything up front, then you really just don't have a financial investment, because if you're, you know, if you're making money and then putting that money back into the company, it's not like a personal financial investment. So unless you bought equipment up front, or had a loan to buy equipment or anything, that kind of stuff, you don't really have necessarily, as a freelancer, you don't really have a financial investment in the business. So the answer might just be zero in that case. Hope that sort of helps. Next question. As a freelancer, what would disqualify me from unemployment benefits other than what you listed? All my gigs for the next few months have been canceled. Really the only thing that disqualifies anyone from unemployment benefits right now is if you're still making money. That's really it. If you're still earning income, and like I said, it's kind of a gray area if you're still earning income from some sources but have gotten canceled for the other ones. And that's actually a segue to the next question. If you're partially employed with a W-2 job, can you still apply for unemployment? The answer is maybe. If you're still getting some income and not other income, I would apply. And again, you might have to apply a few times because it may tell you you're ineligible to begin with. But if you're uncertain about it, just apply, start going through the process, and you'll find out one way or another soon enough. Next question. As a musician, I anticipate the economic impacts of this pandemic will truly limit support for the arts. Would you recommend investing my time into maintaining my craft or into one that the emerging society will not be able to deny budgeting for? That's a very good question, and a very astute, I would say, observation of what is happening right now. So I was a singer, a professional musician during the last economic downturn in 2008, 2009. And this question came up a lot back then as well. And it comes up, I think, with anyone who is trying to make a living as an artist. Is it really worth it for me to do this? Am I going to continue to be able to make a living doing this thing, what I do? I think it's someone, any artist asks themselves every day, is this worth it? Is this a real job? Is this, you know, something that society values enough for me to keep doing? And the answer is, it's really up to you. You know, it's obviously harder during economic downturns because companies cut budgets, they cut sponsorships for arts, states cut their budgets for arts, federal government cuts their budget for the arts. It's always the first thing to go. And you always wonder whether that money is ever going to come back. But the reason we make careers in the arts is because it's something we value, and it's something that we think we have to add to society. And if you think that that is something that you have something that is worth continuing to add to society, by all means, I think you should keep doing it, keep working on your craft. But you also need to be realistic about what you think your own financial situation can handle. If it's something where you need to try and find a temp job, try and find another line of work for a little while and keep your art going on the side, there's no shame in doing that, especially during right now when everyone's so uncertain. But you know, I don't think it's because this downturn right now is so sudden and so unexpected and so widespread. We don't really know what the long-term effect of it is going to be for people who try to make a living in the arts. but these downturns have happened before, and people still make their living in the arts. And it's always going to be a big worry for people, but I don't think that should be a reason to discourage you. Saki, do you have any other thoughts on this question? I think it's good to know from someone who's also trying to make a living in the arts right now as well.
Well, let's see. As far as I know, I know the self-employed freelancers are left out with unemployment and stuff at first, but I feel like government heard our voices and are now helping us. And I know that the National Endowment of the Arts got a huge grant from the government at the last bill. So all I can say is that I hope it's going to be okay. And yeah, that's all I have to say for now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. And, but as a financial planner, it's not my position to tell anyone that they shouldn't try to keep making a living doing what they love. This is what I try to enable people to do in my regular life. And so I would say, by all means, if it's something you think you can continue to add value to society by doing it, you should keep doing it. The last question I have on the list right now is this one. If I'm unemployed from my regular gigs and I collect unemployment, do I have to try to get some other non-related job in the meantime? For instance, as an unemployed violist, do I have to try and get a job at the grocery store or Home Depot? That's a really good question, and one that I don't have a definite answer for, because like so many other things that relate to self-employment right now, it's a gray area. I would say that you should, first of all, go through the application process, because that's the place you need to start out with. And your state might have its own requirements for what kind of work you need to be pursuing to actually, or you need to be, what kind of work you need to be trying to get to continue to be eligible for unemployment. Because for some states it may be different than others. I would look at your state's unemployment office website and see if they can answer that information, because it may not be the same in every state. And we do have one more question that came in. If I made a mistake on my unemployment insurance application, should I just submit another? That's another good question. I think it depends on if you had an answer back that said you were denied or something because of something on your application that turned out to be a mistake, then you should resubmit if you got an answer back. If you're still waiting to hear back on the application, I would wait until you hear an answer back, and then go back and apply. It again might depend on the state that you're in, and they may have information on that on the website. But I would at least wait and see if you had an answer come back. One more question that came in just now. I'm immunocompromised. Unemployment says you need to be seeking work actively, but this could be a health risk to myself on available jobs like working at the grocery store. How do I navigate this? That's another really good question. If you can't work due to health conditions that are related to the coronavirus because you're sick or you have a family member who's sick, I understand that it sounds like you're not specifically sick right now, but if you're not able to work for one of those reasons, you're eligible for unemployment. So I would say absolutely you should be eligible for unemployment in that case, and you should go ahead and apply. So that was the last question that came in for me. If anyone else has any more questions, please get them in now. I'll give you a couple minutes to do so. Just to wrap up, I want to once again say thank you for everyone who took the time to watch tonight. And I will be making this available for watching later on if you want. And like I said before, I'll be sending out both the slides from this presentation and also that spreadsheet tool for planning for the future to be able to, for you to have for your own use later on. So thank you to Saki for collaborating with me on this, and thank you to you all for watching. I wish you the best of luck and good health and happiness in the weeks and months to come. If you have any questions, you want to set up some time to talk, please feel free to email me at ben@freelancefp.com. Just look up freelance financial planning too, if you want, and I'd be happy to set up a time to talk to. And again, thank you, and best of luck to you all. Bye.